Lots to discuss, so let's dig right into it. My first question has to be about the biggest news that we keep on hearing about today, the $1.9 trillion COVID relief package by the Biden administration. My first question to you about that is, while the House is voting currently, and while we count if it's going to be passed or not, what do you think are the most important aspects of this bill? What has been the key important factors that have stood out to you the most?
Well, several actually, but to highlight the most important is, of course, it's going to be giving a lot of aid for COVID relief itself, meaning the vaccination process and that type of thing. The budget, the new Relief Act will also bring in a lot of assistance to states. States' budgets have been devastated, whether they're Republican or Democrat, doesn't matter, but it's going to give a lot of budget boosts to the states so that they're able to make up for lost tax revenue over the past year because of the pandemic. Number three, of course, is going to be helping a lot of individuals in America. This is the biggest relief package possibly ever passed in U.S. history. And it's going to be extremely significant because what they're trying to do is go all out with interest rates being as low as they are, probably at zero, go all out, infuse the markets, infuse people with capital so they can all bounce back, and then look forward to a robust economy. So they've extended the unemployment benefits. They're going to send out some more IRS checks for tax relief, the $1,400 checks to those who qualify, to households that fall within the budget for that, and so on and so forth. I expect to see an immediate boost to the economy, either through people saving what they have to, paying off bills, or just going out and beginning to patronize businesses as they all reopen because of the rollout of the vaccines. The most important will be the rollout of vaccines with the help of money from this budget. And more significantly than the unemployment and all the rest of it is the fact that states, many of whose infrastructure has been threatened by the dire consequences of a lack of tax collections, will be able to recover themselves. And once that happens, they can implement programs to give businesses boosts, to give individuals boosts, and to therefore overall increase employment. The goal, of course, of all this is to get rid of these unemployment numbers, to get rid of all the business failures, and to once again give a shot in the arm to the economy.
Right. Let's talk a little bit more about these stimulus checks and also the extended unemployment benefits. They brought it down to $300 from $400 in negotiations. And also the $1,400 stimulus check, in the third round of these stimulus checks, it's not going to go to every individual that got money in the first two rounds of the stimulus checks. They have reduced the qualifications for who should receive it or not. How have you analyzed it? Was it a smart decision on them to do that?
I think it was actually Joe Manchin in the Senate, Joe Manchin, the moderate Democrat, or the conservative Democrat, if you will, was the one who raised the objections, and he was the one that wanted the extra $400 trimmed down to back to $300. When you think about it, it's not a bad decision. You don't want to just throw money away, just dole it out free, because it's not free. Eventually, they're going to be the next generation or two of Americans who'll be paying for this deficit. Of course, President Biden's assertion has been that this is the time to pump in money into the economy, to do things like this, because we'll be able to afford to repay the debt as long as interest rates are low. I think Joe Manchin's intention was to make sure that we didn't go ahead of ourselves. In other words, saddle our own children and grandchildren with enormous debt that they would all have to be paying through income taxes and the like. So I think that aspect was very, very good. As to the stimulus, yes, of course, there were a lot of people who turned out who were making above $150,000 jointly, like up to $200,000, $250,000, or $300,000 receiving the full relief check. They really didn't need it, because people like that are assumed, people who are in that income bracket are assumed to have had some cushion of savings and able to withstand some of the pandemic's onslaught. And so it's pretty reasonable. And I think we're now talking in the context of people getting vaccinated. We're hearing about the downward trend in COVID spread. We're talking about less hospitalizations, less deaths, etc., which means people can now get back to a normal activity at some point, which means we can see some normal employment beginning to take shape and maybe robust employment. So therefore, I think the idea was not to go completely all out and just throw the money away, because now things have already begun to improve, and to just make sure that this money goes to those who really need it up to September, and then they're going to review and see forward if anything more will be necessary.
Right. Another big aspect that was struck down in this COVID-19 relief package was the $15 minimum wage. It's been promised by the Biden administration. They campaigned on it. Democrats want it as well. How have you looked at this? Should they have taken it out?
I talked to a lot of small business owners. I talked to the hospitality industry, for instance. Most of the Indian community, half the hotels in this country are owned by the Indian community, members of the Indian American community. Many of them are independent hoteliers. I'm giving this as an example. Restaurants. The minimum wage of $15 would actually lead to a rethinking of how business operates. So many of these folks have told me, many folks in small businesses have told me, well, if there's a $15 minimum wage, I'm going to have to raise, the price of my goods, my services, etc., and pass that on to the consumer. So the skepticism over there is the fact that if you have a $15 minimum wage and you fix that, now all of a sudden a quarter pounder with cheese and fries at a McDonald's is not going to cost what you get right now, the meal specials and all the rest of it. It's suddenly going to be hiked by $3 or $4. So there's a lot of inflation that could be tied to it. And so there were many who were conservatively prudent on the other side of the fence who were talking about, we got to get this out of there. They also said it doesn't deserve to be, the $15 minimum wage does not deserve to be a part of a COVID relief package. It's not COVID relief. It's a whole separate issue to be discussed. The minimum wage has been discussed for a few decades. It hasn't been raised in many years. I think it stands at $7 and change right now. And the idea is to get it up to 10 and then to 11 and 12 and so on and so forth, gradually do it. And so I think that was also a good decision not to include the $15 minimum wage in this particular package.
Right. But do you think, or do you believe that this entire discussion on minimum wage will continue, that will be readdressed by this administration?
Yes, it's going to continue. There will be a discussion on it. There will be back and forth on it. I expect it to be introduced as a separate bill at some point in the near or not too distant future. And that means that there will be some bargaining on both sides of the aisle going on, and with the independents that are around as well, who think differently from both parties, the Republicans and the Democrats. And I expect this is going to be hammered out. There's going to be a lot of business folks will have to be involved in this. I mean, when you talk about the big companies, the big corporations, for them, this is not much of a discussion. But we're talking mainly about small businesses, moderate businesses, who are the drivers of the U.S. economy altogether, right? On the whole, it's them who drive the economy. But if they start to say we can't afford to pay $15 minimum wages to workers and keep them full time, we got a problem with the power engine that gets this economy going. So this is going to go on for a little bit, but I think there will be a separate bill that will be introduced on this matter.
Well, let's hope for this, because I think the minimum wage could get a little bit of a spike here. When you're looking at this COVID-19 relief package, no Republicans voted affirmative in the Senate, and we don't expect them to vote in the House either. What do you think is their biggest problem with this package? Is it primarily political that they're going against it, or do they have real issues that make sense?
100%. It is political. It is a Republican philosophy, conservative philosophy. However, Republicans traditionally have conservatives and conservative fiscals. So that means that they do not enjoy spending money where they think it shouldn't be spent. Now, ironically, many of them seek to get reelected using high-powered wealthy donors. All right, they get donations from wealthy folks. And so the wealthy folks, according to common wisdom, tend not to want to spend money on just about everybody, but on things that matter economically, that would generate more wealth and capital. And so that's something to understand about the conservatives. that for them, just handing out money to make people more comfortable is not in their way of thinking. They're thinking business, they're thinking corporations, they're thinking donors who will say, wait a minute, we don't want to give money to a whole segment of the population over here. We want to give money to investments. There's a very different type of thinking, whereas Democrats, with the more liberal leaning thinking, are thinking about the welfare generally of the entire population, the less, those who have the least. All right, and it's some would call it socialistic thinking, which it really isn't, because you can take the example of the UK, which has free healthcare for all, and many other countries like that. So they would say, no, it's not socialist thinking, but there are certain essentials that people need, and therefore a budget would have to take that into account. But the Republicans, to answer your question pointedly, they voted idealistically, they voted party line, and they went gung-ho to show that they're unified in what they want, which is they don't want the Democrats getting credit for this with their support. So that's it.
Right. Before I go into the other topic that I want to discuss with you, I just want you to reflect on the fact that in a poll, it suggests that 61% Americans support the bill. Your comments?
I think it's a little more than that now. I think it was about close to 60% that actually support this, because look at blue collar workers. You look at a lot of people throughout the country, and I've just been traveling to a couple of cities outside, in other states right now, and I've talked to people exactly about this, and most people are looking forward, especially to the $1,400 relief check. So that tells me that a lot of people are biting, even though they may have voted for, Trump. A lot of blue collar workers say they have voted for Trump, and they were disappointed he didn't get reelected and still believe he should have been reelected. But at the same time, those are the folks telling me that they're happy to see that they're hoping and will be happy to receive another $1,400, in their bank accounts. And who wouldn't? Who wouldn't? I mean, so now what they do with it is going to be a different matter. But I think, the polls had been showing about 51 to 53 to 54% of the popular vote was in favor of this bill and in favor of receiving those checks in particular. I think it's closer to 60.
Wow, that is very great to hear. Moving on, I'd like to now talk to you about one of the nominees that has gained some attention. She is South Asian American, and her name is Vanita Gupta. She has been nominated for the Associate Attorney General. She has been called anti-police, and she has given her own comments on police defunding as well. If elected, she'll be the first woman of color, I suppose the first South Asian American in that post. How have you looked at her, and do you think the criticism coming her way is fair?
Well, I hope it doesn't go the way of Neera Tanden, because your past comments do tend to come back and haunt you. She's got a pretty good record, and she's been very outspoken as well. So I have a feeling that they're going to start to scrutinize a lot of her, tweets and things like that if she has them out there still. And depending on how the comments were, if they were particularly acerbic, and as far as law enforcement, if it turns out that she had spoken a bit too much, I'm not entirely sure. Haven't checked her record on that specifically, but assuming from what I'm hearing, if she talked a lot about defunding police, et cetera, that's going to be a problem for her. I imagine she supports, police reform, which is a different matter altogether, which means a police re-education program, so that sensitivity toward minorities will be more forthcoming. And I think she would be a pretty good choice for that particular type of program implementation, is police sensitivity training, and that's what's really needed. A lot has been spoken about the police culture, a very militaristic training program for most police departments in the country, and that type of thing. And I think what's been lost in all of it is the fact that many police haven't been sensitized enough to minority communities, to their problems, to their particular issues, and that type of thing. I think I've spoken to you before. One of the things, I don't know if Ms. Gupta agrees with me, but I've always talked about, community policing being something that should be advocated, and I'm sure she might be one of the people to do that.
Right. What do you think are her chances?
Difficult to say right now. I'd say 50-50.
Right. Moving on, I'd like to now discuss something that's been bothering a lot of women across the nation and something that impacts our state of New York. You're in New Jersey, in the neighboring state. I'd like to talk to you about Governor Andrew Cuomo and the allegations that have come across against him. There are 5 girls, women, who have come out and have said and have allegated sexual assault against him. My question to you is, number one, how have you analyzed this question and this entire situation? And number two, should Governor Cuomo resign right now while this entire case is going on?
A very interesting question you've asked me. Yes, with so many women coming forward to make allegations, obviously you can't take them lightly. Any allegation made by a woman or anybody who's been sexually harassed is extremely serious, needs to be taken seriously. And with so many of them coming out there now and being outspoken and talking about it, yes, I think he should resign. He should resign immediately, because otherwise it's going to do a lot of damage to New York. It's going to do a lot of damage to the Democratic Party, if you will. And I think he needs to immediately step down, defend himself, later on in the public forum or in a court of law, should these women bring legal action against him. But it is extremely important. At this point, I think he is not going to be accepted as a legitimate ruler of the state of New York, a very important state. And especially after this whole COVID crisis, where he seemed to have done great initially. But in the past few months, there have been a lot of businesses that have also been in uproar against him, especially the closure of restaurants and so on and so forth for so long. And I think, yes, he needs to resign immediately. If I were to make a call, that's what I would call.
In a press briefing, he addressed New York State and he also addressed the nation at the same time. And he said that he was sorry for making these women feel uncomfortable. He didn't know it at that moment. And then he also said he will not resign right now, that the state needs him. They have to work on the budget. COVID-19 vaccinations are going on. What do you have to say about his defense?
No good. The defense is absolutely no good. You can't say you're sorry for having said something that's already an admission of guilt. That means you acknowledge you have said something that made the women uncomfortable. But when they come out in such large numbers, you have no moral responsibility, no moral authority to hang on to power. You need to step down immediately. And this is, as an objective journalist, I can tell you that, and as a citizen, just watching it, I mean, I admired, incidentally, many years ago, I admired Andrew Cuomo's father, the former governor, Mario Cuomo, and I thought he was a stellar individual, a fantastic attorney, a great governor of the state of New York, and a great orator. And so, but this is a serious matter, and therefore Andrew Cuomo, the son, needs to quit.
Right. I just have 2 more questions here left for you. The first one is on the fact that Texas has now become the state that has finally opened fully as of today. There is no mask mandate in public settings, and all of the restaurants, the working place, the offices, everything is open at full capacity. Do you think this is a political move more than a move to really bring back the economy? And what does it show when the federal government is denouncing the fact that you are opening up these restrictions way too fast, but they continue to do so? What are they trying to show from this?
It's both a political move, and it's a show of defiance against the federal government, which is now run by Democrats. And it's also pressure from business interests in the state of Texas. That's a big state. It's recently been slammed by unseen winter weather over there. As you know, there were huge power outages in the state, etc. And I think what the governor is trying to do is, because in politics and in administration, there comes a time when you sort of try to assess, how long will you last if you keep things going the way they are. And I think that's what Governor Greg Abbott has done, is assessed he better take some action that's dramatic, that'll make people feel comfortable and happy. Now, whether this was the right move or not, I think it's a wrong move at this time. We are just seeing COVID numbers plateauing and starting to head down because of the vaccination process, because people are now beginning to, have been following the mandates of the CDC, et cetera, such as masking, social distancing, and more. And the time has come to keep up these mandates for at least the next 2 or 3 months, and then open up gradually. This sudden opening up is highly risky. If we have a spike in numbers again in Texas, we're going to have a huge problem once again. I, in fact, foresee many states, because of this spike, because of this opening up, to say we don't want people from Texas coming in right now. So
Right.
if you were to take a flight from Texas to, say, New York or New Jersey or to Chicago or something, I can bet you those states, Illinois, New York, New Jersey, etc., would say, we don't want you right now. Please don't come. We're not going to allow flights coming in, people coming in from there, unless they're our own citizens who will then be forced to quarantine.
Right.
But we're
But
putting ourselves, they are putting themselves at risk
right.
for a spike. And this is being mentioned vociferously by doctors over there, emergency room physicians, medical professionals all over Texas are horrified by his decision.
Right. Do you fear that other red states will follow?
Yes, and many states have already followed this. Mississippi, that's already come, opening up. There are many states. Florida is going to be doing it. I'm sure if they haven't already, they'll be. I expect Florida very quickly to start saying, forget it. And they've been doing quite a bit openly anyway, so it won't come as a surprise or a thing. But I think let's also think of something else. What's happening here also, in fairness to these governors, is people are getting tired. People are getting tired of having to wear the mask, social distance all the time. People are, tired of not being able to hug their children, grandchildren, parents, whatever the case may be. And I think you see a general sense of frustration in the public where they've had enough of this pandemic and the restrictions. The other thing is, most Americans, like in most democracies around the world, even in India, for instance, as an example, when you're a free society, after a while you say enough is enough, and you don't want government telling you what to do anymore. And at that point, you get a situation where you might actually have a rebellion, not a violent rebellion or anything like that, but a rebellion from people saying, you know what, to heck with the mask, I don't want the mask anymore. And I think, in fairness to some of these states, you start to see that they might have assessed it that way and figured, okay, let's not get people now bottled up for too long and let them have their way. Let's see what happens. I'm sure if it spikes, though, that even governors like Greg Abbott or Ron DeSantis in Florida, et cetera, they're going to sort of pull back if they have to. So I think I'd like to play a more optimistic card here and say, I hope it goes well, and hopefully it will go well.
Yeah, it's definitely super worrisome right now. My last question to you is actually just asking you about your prediction for the next coming weeks. What are you following in politics? What do you think is going to happen in the next coming weeks?
I think there's going to be not much going to happen after this COVID relief bill is passed. The crux of discussions will then focus on the minimum wage. It'll be on the Affordable Care Act, things like that, to see how much more to do on these two major issues. But one of the big issues, of course, right now, as we speak, is immigration, the clamoring at the southern border right now, the housing and detention centers of children. And that's sort of put the Democrats in an embarrassing position to defend themselves with Donald Trump on one side, for instance, saying, look, I told you, if you start to be too liberal with immigrants and asylum seekers and the like, you're going to see this big crush at the border. So it's a big crisis now that's happened with the Biden administration asking people, do not come to the border. We're not opening up immigration by any means. All we're trying to do is be compassionate to those who have been there, compassionate, and look at each and every case meritoriously. Immigration is going to be the big burning issue over the next couple of weeks, if not more.